Jimmy Kimmel and the debate over free speech. Lawmakers, late night hosts, and the public blasting the White House's threats to free speech in the wake of ABC's suspension of the late night host. Right now, you're taking a live look at a protest happening in New York City. This is the WGA East, the Writers Guild, protesting the decision to pull Jimmy Kimmel's show. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One on Thursday, President Trump said to the TV networks, quote, "They give me only bad press and then they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. All they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. They're an arm of the Democratic Party." He went on to say the decision would be up to FCC Chair Brendan Carr. So joining us now to talk about this story and much more, we have political and legal analyst Madeline Somerville. Madeline, good morning. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Thanks so much for joining us on the Live Zone.
Happy Friday to you. Thanks for having me.
All right. I want your reaction first to what happened with Jimmy Kimmel and this decision by ABC and Disney to suspend him indefinitely.
So I have a different reaction, I guess, personally than I do as a lawyer. Personally, I feel like this is an addition. This is another check in the box on the "are we turning into authoritarian country" checklist, right? That's my opinion. As a lawyer, I can give you the analysis, right? So when you have somebody who is a president of the United States who's on a plane saying, you know, I don't like the coverage that the media is giving of me right now. Maybe we take their license away. But, you know, it's not going to be up to me. It's going to be up to the FCC chair. The FCC chair was one of Russell Vogt's comrades at the Heritage Foundation. Russell Vogt is the Office of Management and Budget Director who also wrote Project 2025. So it's not a good look, y'all. It's not a good look what we've got going on right now. When it comes to Kimmel in particular, it's not a news show, right? So I could understand if it was a news show and they were reporting something that was incorrect. But he's giving his opinion about what he thought a cause was. And I personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I understand the free speech analysis, though, right? So we've got the government can't control what government entities are going to say, right? That's one aspect. And then there's the government trying to control private entities. So Trump knows he can't do that. So one way that he can do that is by saying, I have to approve certain mergers, right? My administration, Brendan Carr, has to approve certain business deals that your network is part of. And if I don't like the way that you're treating me, I might not approve it. So that is a way that the government can interfere with private sector dealings without it technically being against the law.
So the idea that private companies can respond to these situations how they see fit. Your employer, if you're an at-will employee, if they don't like what you say, there are limits to free speech. It doesn't necessarily protect you from getting fired from your job. However, threatening FCC licensing, is that a violation of free speech?
I think so. But the way that our court system works is that usually there has to be a violation first before there can be any case actually brought in court, right? Because you have to have what's called standing, which means you have to have enough of a reason to be in court in the first place. So if there's just a threat and they can't draw that exact link between what the threat was and revoking the licensing, if that's what happens, and if they have an alternate reason why they're doing it, in addition to the threat, they can usually get away with it. So it's a very touchy situation. And in the courts, you're supposed to give deference to the president and to the presidential administration, because just like if I walked into court and gave a statement, I wouldn't have to be sworn in, because lawyers are supposed to be they're given the credence of being somebody who would tell the truth. It's supposed to be the same thing here. So we'll certainly see, but if you are overstepping, that would be for a judge to decide.
Cameras caught Jimmy meeting with his lawyer yesterday. From your legal perspective, does he have any legal fight? Does he have any legal recourse? Is there anything he can actually do to kind of fight back against this suspension?
So I think he definitely has a case, depending on what the jurisdictional laws are that's governing this. Because as a lawyer, I'm only barred in Georgia, so I don't know what the laws are where he's located or where the home base of his parent company is located. But there are at-will employers, right? So you can fire somebody for any reason if you're an at-will employee, but there are certain protections that still exist within the private sector, and that's usually dependent on what the local laws are. That's why there are a lot of local laws that apply to like LGBT protections, right? Because you have to have the local laws that protect it versus in terms of speech, because it can't come from the top down. So it will depend on what the local laws are there, but I would say he has a case.
All right. Well, we'll keep following this one for sure. In the meantime, let's talk about a new poll focused on Republicans and the outlook on the future. The new AP NORC poll reveals Republican optimism of the country's future has fallen. Only half of Republicans polled think the nation is on the right course. That's compared to 70% back in June. A main concern among those polled was political violence and division. So let me get your reaction to this new poll.
Yeah, I'm really surprised actually to hear that, but it's interesting because I was on a more right-wing radio show last night, and I'm usually the left-wing commentator on right-wing radio shows, but before that I was just neutral, so I know how to play both games. And I heard some folks say, you know, I'm so glad for what President Trump is doing in DC, but I don't want him to come here, right? People who are Trump supporters, Republicans. And so I think that Republicans are realizing the potential for impact on their own lives for something that they've just seen on TV elsewhere. And that is a worry that people are having. It also leaves an opportunity for President Trump to come in and say, oh, there's a problem here, let me fix it. And that is another way that he might be able to get the troops that he wants into the different cities.
I mean, you make great points, let's put it that way, that it's better for thee, not for me. We'll kind of see how this plays out. Let's move back here to D.C. now and talk about D.C. Councilmember Robert White, who is challenging Eleanor Holmes Norton, the D.C. Congresswoman, the delegate. He says he will run against her next year. It could be one of her first major challenges. In a video posted to social media, White says threats to home rule have led to a revamped need for new representation in Congress. Now, this comes amid growing concerns about Eleanor Holmes Norton's age and her ability to serve as D.C.'s non-voting member on Capitol Hill. Yesterday, the 88-year-old reiterated she is not planning to retire. So, in your opinion, should she retire? Should she step aside and make way for some quote-unquote younger blood to take up this fight for home rule that she has passionately defended for so long?
Well, I can certainly understand her wanting to not leave, because she probably, if she's somebody who's driven by her heart, which it sounds like she is somebody who's saying, no, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life, is to stand up against something like this. I'm ready to do it. But I saw an op-ed that Donna Brazile wrote, it was in the New York Times or Washington Post, where she said, this is my mentor. She's been my mentor my whole life. I've adored her. I still think she should resign and step aside. And that says a lot, because I don't think I'd be able to say that about my mentor unless, you know, it was a dire, serious situation where she really feels like the younger generation needs to come in and that the older generation is not as impactful. So I can certainly understand her wanting to stay. But I think also the issue of being able to appeal to reflect the views of your younger voters in society and to reflect the views of a new generation is important too. So I think I guess I'd have to go with Donna Brazile on that one, but I 100% understand her wanting to stay and fight.
Well, you know, you brought up the age. We were talking about age. She is the oldest member of the U.S. House, but there are several senior citizens, let's just call a spade here, who serve currently and are probably running for re-election. In your opinion, should there be term limits or age limits for this position?
So it's funny because this is one thing that Democrats and Republicans often agree on. Heck yes, I think there should be term limits. It's a really, really difficult way to make sure that there's freedom in that there's an open election process. That there's an open election process around us, And it feels like it's closed off when somebody has dominated for so long. Here's the secret, actually, as to why. I can say this as a Democrat strategist, is because local elections are based on name recognition. So, everybody knows who the main players are that are running for president, but most people don't know the names of their local representatives. And so if somebody knows somebody's name, it's probably because they've been around for a long time. And if they know the name, they're more likely to choose it. Like if you're taking a standardized test, for example, and you don't know the answer to A, B, C, or D, but you recognize C, you're statistically more likely to pick C. So if you recognize a name because it's been around for a really long time, you're more likely to pick it. So psychologically, it makes sense, right, for somebody to be around a long time, but it's almost impossible for it to be overcome. So I think term limits would allow us to overcome that problem. That was me nerding out on politics, but I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, I'm gonna follow up on that just for a second. Then from that viewpoint and from that strategy viewpoint, is the hope then that the candidate with the name recognition keeps running and you just surround her with people who can help kind of fill in the gaps that she might not be able to do anymore? And I'm only using this in a hypothetical example.
I think you may have just identified what the problem is with the Democratic Party. I think that may be the actual issue, right? Because I think I've been super critical of the Democratic Party, both parties really, but I think they're afraid to take any steps outside of what they know because there is older leadership and because there are these truisms that stay, consistent throughout time about human nature. And so I think that's probably what they're trying to do, rather than taking a risk, rather than saying it's more important to me that I'm reflecting the values and thoughts of my constituents than it is for me to stay safe and to do the thing that I hope will still work, because it didn't work last time.
All right, let's talk about former Vice President Kamala Harris now, because she is opening up about her running mate decision. I'm sure you saw this in an excerpt from her forthcoming book, 107 Days. She said choosing Pete Buttigieg was too risky because they were already asking a lot of America to accept a black woman. Buttigieg responded that he, quote, believes in giving Americans more credit. So nearly a year after the election, was this the right call? And does this admission surprise you in any way, shape, or form?
It does surprise me a lot. And actually, it was completely unrelated because I didn't know this news story was going to come out. But I posted a couple of days ago. I had an interview on my social media. It's Maddie's Hot Take about who I thought the next leader of the Democratic Party should be. And I love Pete Buttigieg. I'm also from Indiana, but I didn't live there when he was mayor of one of the cities in Indiana. But I truly think that he's brilliant. And I do think that the public deserves more credit than they're being given. However, I will tell you that Vivek Ramaswamy, who was one of the Republican candidates, who spoke out consistently about the fact that he didn't think it was going to make a difference that he was Hindu, or that his parents weren't born in this country, he admitted that he was wrong about that about a year in, and after he had said that he wasn't going to run for president anymore on a lot of different podcasts, he went on and said, I'm really shocked that people said that they wouldn't vote for me. So I think it depends on who you're trying to get to vote for you. And if there's enough people who are still in your camp, regardless of who you are, but I have faith like Pete Buttigieg does. I truly do. I truly think that if he stood up there and said what was in somebody's heart that they themselves weren't able to put words to yet, it wouldn't matter. I really do have that faith in people.
Has there been any response from the vice president candidate that she did choose, Tim Walz?
Not that I've heard of, which also makes sense because it's a touchy issue. But because Pete Buttigieg responded to it so easily, and I think he probably should. He probably should just be like, I love Pete. It's cool. No hard feelings or whatever it is. Because right now they're all on the same team. We really can't afford any division in the Democratic Party at this point. It's already mega super extra divided. So it would be nice if there was just a statement of unity, because it already feels so divided.
All right. Political and legal analyst Madeline Somerville, thank you so much for spending some time with us on this Friday afternoon on the Live Zone.
Thanks so much. Thanks for asking great questions.
I appreciate it.